Hello and good morning all. Welcome to the kickoff of the Smart Readiness Indicator platform. We have our first plenary meeting here and we are very happy to have so many attendants here. I see a lot of people are still logging in, so I propose to wait 2 more minutes to make sure that everybody can tune in.
Hallo. Guten Morgen, Peter.
Hallo Alfred.
So voila, already well over 100 participants and numbers still going up. Before starting with the official part, I wish to remind you of some practical rules to make this meeting as efficient as possible. First of all, I want to remind that this meeting is and will continue to be recorded. So I hope you're all fine with that. If not, I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to leave the meeting. Next, we ask you to not use the microphone. If you have questions, I hope you have questions and we'll be very happy to answer them, but please write down your answers in the chat and we've dedicated time at the end of the meeting to answer them. Notification on that, depending on the number of questions, we expect a lot of participants and we want to stick to the time of the meeting as much as possible. So it might be that we're not able to answer all of the questions. We'll try to combine them and try to answer the most urgent ones. If it happens that your question is not answered, the SRI support team remains at your disposal. You can write down your question also in email in writing to us, and we'll make sure to answer you directly and potentially also include it in the frequently asked questions section on the website of the Smart Readiness Indicator at the Commission website. We'll get back to that later on. So just a reminder, the Q&A is at the end, but please, if you have a question, don't wait till the very end, write it down at once. It also helps the support team to group the questions and make this Q&A session as interesting as possible. So with those practicalities being said, it's time to move towards the official welcome. The official welcome will be brought to you by Stefan Moser, but let me quickly guide you to the agenda to know what's coming afterwards. We will then move on to an introduction, showcasing what's been done previously on the SRI development, so get you up to speed with that. Also what's in the energy performance of the Buildings Directive and the delegated and implementing acts on the SRI, and next look into the tasks of the SRI support team. Afterwards, we'll be covering the topic of current state of implementation and testing of the SRI in Europe. And we'll have 3 testimonials of member states on that topic. We're very happy to have them on board as well. We'll go for a short break, and afterwards, after coming back, we'll explain what the SRI platform is all about and how we'll operate that, and welcome you to join in the discussions after this kickoff session. And as said, we'll end with a discussion and Q&A before going to the official close of the meeting. So that's the agenda. I hope it will be an interesting ride for all. And now I'm very honored to announce Stefan Moser, head of unit in DG NR, working on the topic of buildings. And we're very happy to have him here doing the official welcome and introduction. So Stefan, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stijn, and good morning to all of you. We are very happy that we can bring forward this very important topic of the Smart Readiness Indicator. And we basically have now the culmination of several years of work with the revision of the EPBD in 2018. And there has been now the preparation of delegated implementing acts and also development of measures and tools to support member states in the test phase, and that is basically a common enterprise for us, a common endeavor, which we have together to basically implement the Smart Readiness Indicator. And this is an exchange forum. So the platform is an exchange forum which should involve all interested stakeholders and also the EU member states, and basically bring us forward in the discussions and serve as a hub for technical, regulatory, and also implementation aspects of the topic. As we have underlined very much also in the renovation wave, and it's also reflected in the revision proposal of the EPBD, which the Commission brought forward yesterday. Smart buildings are really absolutely key in ensuring system integration and basically delivering the high ambition under the European Green Deal. Without smartness, it doesn't work. We need to integrate renewables, ensure efficient production, but also use of renewables in the buildings, but also at higher level of aggregation, district or city level. And this is crucial to decarbonize the construction and transport sector as well, and the building sector, and promote really a circular economy. We need active consumers, producers who know what's going on, demand response. This is absolutely key to ensure the best possible energy savings, energy efficiency, but also then more awareness of what is actually going on with a building to optimize the mix of various energy sources, and especially also then ensure energy security through more grid flexibility, reduce costs to reduce also the needs to upgrade further the physical infrastructure. Grid flexibility, demand response are absolutely crucial in this respect and enabled by smartness. And also, of course, it can further ensure the comfort and well-being of the users, because you can in a more targeted manner regulate what you really need. But it requires a very careful integration of several elements, individual systems such as heat pumps, but also the overall building control and automation and of systems, and the connection and interaction with the grid. So the Smart Readiness Indicator is, as you are of course aware, needed to create a full awareness, full knowledge about the benefits of smart technologies in buildings, and also to motivate consumers to accelerate really investments in smart building technologies, and basically also support the overall uptake of innovation of technologies in the building sector. It will also improve the policy linkages between energy more broadly, the energy system, buildings, and other policy segments, in particular the digital single market, which is another key priority of the transition, the green and digital transition, the twin transition. So it's really working hand in hand as policy objectives, and basically will ensure that we are moving forward in the building sector on both tracks and interacting between both tracks in the best possible manner. So yesterday, as you are surely aware, we published the proposal to revise to further improve the energy performance of buildings directive, and the key areas there, as already we had underlined in the renovation wave, are decarbonization, addressing energy poverty, then of course also recovery, growth, opportunities, creation of opportunities, and digitalization and system integration. To reinforce smart buildings, basically, we have several elements, which is basically a further support to the Smart Readiness Indicator, increase visibility of smart buildings and their benefits, then extend the provisions on building automation and control systems, with the objective to cover a greater proportion of the building stock, and then also smart charging points, so to improve the provisions on smart charging points and facilitating grid responsiveness. So the general direction of travel is pretty clear, and we have tried to reinforce it as much as possible in the legislative proposal. Buildings need to get smarter. They need to be ready to be smart, but they also need to get smarter in reality, in order to be more efficient, responsive, and active players in a digitalized energy system. Today, of course, this is building on several years of intensive work. It's the implementation of the EPBD as we have it today, but it's a basis for further improvements through the legislative process, and everything which we do will be further reinforced. So it's exactly what we need to do at this moment, move forward with full steam on the implementation. There's no time to lose, as we can only win from early action, of course, under the overall umbrella of our climate ambition, climate objectives, and energy saving objectives. So there's no case to postpone anything. It's basically needs to move forward as quickly as possible with full steam. The SRI technical team has done tremendous work. So we are very grateful to you having set up this meeting, but also the entire work stream, and really support it and bring it forward, with the objectives to support member states for the testing of the Smart Readiness Indicator, and of course all the stakeholders involved who contribute actively and in a very impressive manner from our point of view. So the website with all the information is now online. The newsletters are sent out to regularly inform the stakeholders about the ongoing process. There's also a help desk for the Smart Readiness Indicator in place, and there are various tools available to help and assist the EU member states and regions which are using the Smart Readiness Indicator. The SRI assessment package, there's also a training package, and a training session was held for the first time last week under this work stream. Moreover, there's also tailored support, which is beginning for volunteering member states to basically test, but also really move forward with the frontline member states who would like to pioneer this important area. We would also like to specifically congratulate the member states who are doing that, which are Austria, Denmark, and France, for paving the way and initiating the test phase. They will kindly share with us today the actions they are doing and their action plan. But we are also in contact with several other member states who are also interested in the Smart Readiness Indicator. And we are very grateful to them also, because then we can move forward with more projects, and the testing phase will be further upgraded and expanded with them. So we are very happy, really, and grateful to you for starting this journey together, and we count on our collective further good cooperation, and also your further support from within your member states, the stakeholders, and of course the great team which we have in place to support this process in order to really move significant progress on the Green Deal, and make sure that also the EPBD more specifically is a full success also in the implementation of what we have already, and of course moving ahead also with the additional improvements which are now to be negotiated next year. So we would like to thank you very much for your attention, and then I look forward to this interesting event today, and then we'll wrap up with Brigitte, my colleague, who has kindly prepared this together with the support team at the end of the session. So all the best to you, and if I don't take the floor actively again, also best wishes for Christmas and the New Year, and we look forward to the very intensive cooperation which we are planning with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moser, for this kind introduction, and I think it was a perfect start to set the scene of where we are. Let's move on and continue the introduction with a very short summary of what has been done on the SRI before, then go to the legal acts and the planning of the SRI consortium. The SRI has a bit of history, and prior to the work that's currently carried out in testing and implementation and the work of the SRI support team, there were prior actions, most notably also 2 technical support studies. And looking at the attendance list of this meeting, I think many of you have been involved in that process as a stakeholder. We had some plenary meetings where multiple of you did join. In between those 2 technical support studies, or based on the outcomes of the first technical support studies, the revision of the EPBD mentioned the SRI as a common union optional scheme. The second technical support study has further fine-tuned that, but now we're a bit further in the process. There have been the legal acts, more on that later, and so the current work of the support team is different from prior settings. So that also means that these plenary meetings, for those of you who are all involved in prior settings, will have a different focus. We'll mainly look into the testing and the implementation of the SRI, and not longer focus on the developments, on the contents, rather how to make sure it now gets traction and gets implemented. I do hope a lot of you have sufficient background, because we currently do not have the timing to go in detail. So very briefly, what is the SRI? For those of you who are not aware, it's an indicator aiming to assess the capacity of a building to reap benefits from smart technologies. It's basically a multi-criteria analysis looking at 7 different impact criteria: energy efficiency, maintenance and fault prediction, comfort, convenience, health, well-being and accessibility, information to occupants, and energy flexibility and storage. This works through a rather simple assessment scheme, because the prior technical support teams have tried to come up with an indicator which is easy to understand and answers the request to create more awareness and motivate people to increase the uptake of smart technologies. At the same time, the support teams had to be conscious about the skills of the people doing the actual assessment, the timing, the cost, etc. Various options were investigated, and eventually it was opted for this rather simple indicator, or easy to assess indicator, and also a rather flexible method with the possibility to be further expanded, improved. And some elements of this method have inherent flexibility, for example, to adapt the method to specific climatic conditions. There is a lot more to say, but as indicated, we don't have time to go in depth now, and I do think most of you have a lot of background on this. If you wish to know more, there's a lot of information out there. There is this training webinar last week held in preparation for this meeting. If you were unable to attend, you can still find the recordings online. There is the SRI training package. And of course, if that still does not satisfy your needs for more information, there's the final report of the technical support studies, which cover all of this in a lot of detail. I just want to remind you of the conclusions then of the technical support team. So the prior studies concluded that this indicator can be a cost-effective instrument. There was an assessment made of the potential impacts across Europe, and it showed to have a large potential for energy savings, improved flexibility, etc., at a very good cost-benefit rate. The support teams concluded that there was a lot of interest by consumers and industrial stakeholders, not only in the method as such, but also in the way that it creates a common terminology to start discussing, to do marketing on smart technologies, because there's a lot of confusion there on the market, and the SRI can help to start structuring these discussions. And finally, also based on a preliminary testing phase, it was concluded that the methodology was sufficiently simple, actionable, and required acceptable efforts in terms of time and efforts needed to carry out the assessment. So these were the conclusions of the technical support team, and then the next stages were undertaken by Commission services. So I would also like to ask Mrs. Brigitte Jacquemont to the floor to now take the word and explain what happened next. Please, Brigitte.
Thank you very much. I will recall a couple of points of context and then present the legal act. But first of all, maybe I will echo Stefan and recall the ambition of the EU. One of our priorities is really to go further and faster to tackle the climate crisis. And the European Green Deal is our blueprint, and we have two important dates to keep in mind. The EU aims to be climate neutral by 2050, and the most important midterm goal is really to cut greenhouse gas emissions by more than half by 2030, so in less than 10 years. And to deliver this on the 2030 and 2050 decarbonization objective, the European Commission is updating EU law, in particular the so-called Fit for 55 package and the revision of the PPD as introduced by Stefan. So, but today really our focus is on the implementation of the PPD. We would like to stress again the importance of this implementation. We have to go further, we have to go faster. And in the current EPPD, under the revision of 2018, the SRE was introduced. Next slide, please. So this was part of a broader legislative initiative called the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. And there are two focus points, renovation and smart buildings. But you can see that the direction remains the same under the Green Deal. Buildings need to get smarter, more efficient, responsive, an active player in the digital energy system. Next slide, please. So regarding the EPPD, it was proposed the creation of this new indicator instrument to rate the smartness of building. And I will go very quickly because it was already explained. So the aim is really to inform building owner and user and to promote smart technology in building. And three key aspects: ability to adapt to operation mode in response to the need of the occupant, ability to maintain energy efficiency, performance and operation of building, and energy flexibility. Next slide, please. So it's just to summarize SRI. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we have a look to the regulatory framework, so in the PPD, it was required to establish the legal framework with two acts. One delegated act that established the Smart Readiness Indicator scheme and the methodology for calculation smart readiness, and one implementing act that details the scheme implementation arrangements, which means how the scheme is rolled out. So so it was, as explained by Sten, based on a very intensive technical work, and the two acts were adopted in October 2020, together with the renovation wave. And it was really after an intensive consultation work with stakeholders and with member state representatives. Next slide, please. So regarding the delegated act, it's really the one that established the scheme and the calculation methodology. So you have the usual provision, and then these acts can be divided into three blocks. So the first one is about scoping the SRE scheme and also clarifying how smart readiness is expressed. and it introduced the notion of smart readiness classes of building. And the Act also clarified the information that has to be included in the SRI certificate. The second block is really the core of the Act. It describes the methodology for calculating smart readiness of building. And you have also annexes about this. And then the third block, it's requirement that apply to the scheme. It's optional for member states, and that compliance with the regulation is required in case the scheme is implemented. And there's also the need to rely on accredited and qualified experts to issue the certificate, and you need to have a control system. If we have a look to the implementing act, this act is quite short. Also, we can also divide it in 3 main blocks. One that clarifies the condition that apply to issue and to use SRI certificates. One key requirement is really that SRI certificates can only be issued by qualified or accredited experts. Then in the second part, you have a requirement from member state about making available to the public the information on these experts. And also it clarifies that the SRI can be associated with other schemes like EPCs or heating and cooling system inspection. And then in the third block, you have a reporting requirement for member states. And also it's really clear that member states can organize a national testing phase before deciding to implement the SRI. So next slide, please. So the regulatory framework is in place, and the implementation can start and have started in member states. And then I will just conclude on the next slide to just to highlight that really it's important to have in mind that the testing phase implementation has to comply with the regulatory framework, but this framework gives flexibility for member states. The decision to launch a test phase or implementing the SRI belongs to EU member states. Only if a member state has decided to do so, a formal SRI assessment can be conducted. And also that the member state shall notify the Commission ahead of launching or implementing the SRI. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Jacquemont, for this presentation from Commission side, and we'll take over from the technical support contract now to explain how this support contract commissioned by European Commission Services supports this testing and implementation phase. This technical support team is commissioned by a 2-year service contract, and the consortium consists of Vito, myself, Stijn Verbeke, working here as coordinator of this consortium. We have Wage Strategic Efficiency Europe, we have Research to Market Solutions, and LIST as project partners. The work started in May 2021 and will end in April 2023. I'll give you a brief update of the various activities that this support contract is carrying out. First task is on supporting the testing and implementation of the SRI in EU member states. So the various activities deployed here, amongst others, we have the help desk. There is the provision of tailor-made support for member states who wish to test or implement the SRI. And there is the SRI assessment package. This is currently already available on request. It consists of a practical guide explaining how to perform the SRI assessment, as well as a calculation sheet to support this testing or implementation phase. Second task is the establishment of the SRI platform. So welcome again, you're at the first public kickoff event of this SRI platform, and later today we'll have a specific block in this meeting to further discuss the structure and operation of this platform and how you can continue to be involved. third task is on providing technical assistance to Commission services for the preparation of EU guidance. So many aspects of the SRI have been described in the legal acts, but there are other elements which remain open and could require further EU guidance to make sure that the SRI is implemented in a harmonized way. So discussions can go on service catalogues, weighting factors, the provision of additional info together with the SRI certificate. For example, cybersecurity and data protection are definitely of interest. There are also discussions on certificate design, etc. That's all done within this task, and specifically on certificate design. I welcome you to also join in the discussion. Currently, there's an open public survey on certificate design, and we're still looking for input. Well, actually, any interested stakeholder can jump in, but we're specifically also looking at building sector specialists, such as facility managers, etc., to provide their input, EPC assessors, and so on. So if you're interested, please join in and provide us your input. Fourth task is on investigating the need for additional EU support on the rollout of the SRI. As an example, well, we're doing a lot of surveys, questionnaires, interviews with member states and other stakeholders, including, for example, on the need for, or the potential need for software developments to further support SRI implementation. And then the last task of the SRI support team is on awareness raising and dissemination. There's the public website on EC website where there's a lot of information already available on the Smart Readiness Indicator, and so the support team helps in keeping this up to date. Amongst others, there is this training package referenced before. There is the help desk, which you can contact for your support questions. Before doing so, I also welcome you to look into the section on more info on the SRI, which is a kind of list of frequently asked questions. So you might already find the answer there. And there's, for example, also in this task 5, also the SRI newsletter. We issue a newsletter every few months. So if you didn't do so, we welcome you to subscribe and stay up to date with the activities of the SRI. So this was the SRI in a nutshell, and also the tasks of the support team and commission. Let's now move on and look into the current state of testing and implementation of the SRI in Europe, and look in some testimonials. So I welcome Sophie to the floor to take this section.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to introduce the member states that have decided to launch a test phase of the SRI. And but first, I would like also to speak about the interest that has been expressed in general by EU stakeholders for the SRI, not only member states that are officially launching the test phase, but also other stakeholders. So as an illustration, we have on the SRI website that has been introduced earlier, we have an average 150 visits per month. We have set up an help desk, and we have already received more than 100 questions through this help desk since its launch in August. As already presented as well, we have delivered a training webinar last week, and we had more than 100 attendees. And we have the assessment package that is available, and already more than 80 requests for this assessment package have been received so far. And finally, we are also exchanging with member states regarding the launch of test phase. And so far we have exchanged, well, informally, let's say, with around 10 member states. Regarding the official test phase that are going to be launched by member states, they can benefit from our support. So the support that is provided by the European Commission through the SRI support team that we are representing. So this adaptive support for each member state can consist in advanced training and coaching of experts and assessors, in supporting also the fine-tuning of the calculation methodology to national specificities. We can also help defining the testing protocol, recruiting building for the testing phase, for instance. We can help elaborating specific communication material or provide any other type of support to the authorities in charge of implementing or testing the SRI. And it can also be any other reasonable request that can be done by the member states that are officially testing the SRI. And here it's an important difference because there are also other expressions of interest. So we are also discussing, or we know that some member states are also very interested in the SRI and are in a favorable position to test the SRI, but for the moment they haven't decided yet to launch formally a test phase. So for instance, some member states are relying on private initiatives. Other member states are conducting research projects to evaluate how they can launch a test phase. So we know, for instance, that Italy is considering this option, and for the moment, a research project is ongoing. And of course, all member states are welcome to launch an official test phase. So at the moment, we have 3 member states that are committed to launch this test phase, and I'm going to give them the floor, but also other member states will be very welcome to express their interest, and we will stay in touch with them and ask again for their interest, and we do hope that they will join the front runners in the coming months. So now, after this brief introduction, let's give the floor to the member states representatives. So let's start with Austria. So I'm pleased to give the floor to Mr. Robert Salgler. Please.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Good morning. Next slide, please. So in Austria, our main motivation is energy flexibility. And as Stefan Moser pointed out in his introduction, there's a huge potential in using renewables like wind and solar power, but we have the bigger problem that the wind blows and the sun shines not necessarily when we need them. So we need to have a concept for energy storage and to use buildings for energy storage. And we regard the SRI as a tool to facilitate this. We are totally happy with the 3 main purposes of the SRI, which is besides the energy flexibility column, also energy savings through technical equipment of the building, and also the convenience aspect. But we believe that as the delegated and implemented acts give free to the member states, we think that these 3 columns should be displayed and shown in separate values, but then optionally they can also be combined to a single number, but still the information for the 3 columns should be visible separately. The reason why we think that is that our main stakeholders in the energy flexibility aspect are the energy companies and energy utility companies. And for them, it's no use to have a single number that includes convenience and technical equipment of buildings for energy saving, because the information they want to have is they want to have a map of buildings in their country, which they can use for energy storage. So coming to the slides, that's why we think that there's still some work to be done on measuring the energy flexibility with the methodology of the SRI, and there have been some national studies on this in our country, where you can see the links on the slide. Next slide, please. We started the test phase in September this year. This is a cooperation between the federal regions in Austria, which I represent here, and who are also responsible for everything related to the APPD in Austria, but it's also a collaboration with the National Climate Ministry, because they fund the research project. And this research project is led by two researchers from REE Intec and from the University of Natural Resources in Austria. Those researchers are important because they do both the further method development and method assessment, and also they need to process the data they get from buildings. But the public authorities, on the other hand, provide in this cooperation is data from as many public buildings as possible. Next slide, please. As I already mentioned, the test phase has started in September, and this has also been officially reported to the Commission. It will, apart from method development, in this test phase, there will be also a significant amount of surveys with stakeholders and also data collection. There will be an online platform where the results of the associated research project will be presented, and we will do a detailed evaluation of all the methods that we use, and we will communicate a summary of the results and the statistical processing of that to the Commission. Next slide, please. That are mainly the things that I already said in my introduction. So I jump to the next slide. And that is for stakeholders who want to participate in the test phase in Austria. There will be proactive stakeholder surveys, but if there are stakeholders in Austria who want to be part of this endeavor from an early stage, then they should contact Armin Knotzer using this email address here, because he's leading the research project accompanying the national test phase in Austria. If you have questions to the more formal aspects of the national test phase or the more political, then you should contact me, and my email address is given on the first slide of this presentation. And with that, I would like to thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Then I will continue with some reflections from Denmark. My name is Alan, and I work for the Danish Energy Agency. And the motivation for us to engage with this test phase is with the overall purpose to investigate potentials and opportunities for this SRI in Denmark. And we will focus on three main areas: testing the developed material, which Steen nicely have been going through at this webinar. Also with some input to the Danish context and some stakeholder involvement, and I'll get back to them later. The organization of the test phase is led by the Danish Energy Agency in cooperation with the Danish Technological Institute. It's formed as a research project with the key stakeholders to be building owners and also the whole ecosystem around buildings and smart buildings. Because we foresee that it's important with some ongoing communication with stakeholders to know more about this new indicator, which my experience is that for many it's still a new indicator also after this 2 to 3 years development. The building we want to test is various and different buildings in Denmark, 25 to 30 buildings, difference from office dwellings, multifamily and educational institutions. We also want to make sure that the test buildings are covered by old and new buildings and with different energy supplies common in Denmark. The assessment will be carried out by assessors from the Danish Technological Institute. So with their technical competences, they will investigate these test buildings. Next slide. The current status is that the project has just started, and we have notified the Commission about this start. You can see some of the milestones starting from December and running until medio 22. Approximately halfway through the project, we would like to have a workshop with stakeholders to make sure that the knowledge gained in this test phase is also available for other stakeholders. And you can see a bit more about that in the next slide, where I'll just elaborate shortly the main focus area. The testing will be based on developed material, the calculation sheet and the assessment package from the support team. And after the test, there will be some interviews with building owners to know more about their understanding and experience of this labeling. We will also make sure that the project provides us with some input to a Danish context based on these test buildings and the performed calculations. We would like from the Technological Institute to have some proposals how the method can or should be adapted into a Danish context. And the third point is this stakeholder involvement, which also quite important for the support team mentioned by Stein. We also see in Denmark, we have to make sure that the involvement among the stakeholders is make sure, and therefore we want to convert knowledge obtained through the above tasks, the testing and the proposal to make sure that this knowledge is also presented from stakeholders, and a practical instrument is that there have been made a LinkedIn group during this test phase, where some status will be given ongoing. Yes, thank you, and my contact information is also in this slide.
Thank you very much, Alan, for this overview. And let's move now to France with Mrs. Walgraff and Mr. Cabassus.
Thank you. Do you hear me well?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Annabelle Vagra from the Ministry for Housing, and I'm working in the unit for quality and sustainability in construction. I will co-present with Nicolas Cabassu from the CEREMA.
Hello. Morning. I'm Nicolas Cabassu, responsible for study on energy and environmental performance on a French public institution, the CEREMA.
Okay, as introduction, what I can say is since many years, the French Ministry for Housing has engaged in experimentation and has set important regulations on the national level in order to reduce the energy consumption of buildings. And the Smart Readiness Indicator is linked to such concern. And it seems consistent for us to take part and to set in a test phase for the SRE assessment and to see how it could work in real conditions. Moreover, we were already involved in the working groups organized by the Commission and in a public test with the French sector as well. Nicolas, I'll take you the floor.
Yes. As said, Annabelle, we have been involved in the SRE since 1918. We joined the working group A and B, so we had the chance to participate and to develop the SRE, and so to understand in details how the SRE works, about calculation method, the use services catalog, and so on. Logically, we participate to the public test, a test phase that the consortium has organized on the summer of 2019. Sorry. So we test the SRE with some of building, some French building. We have only 7 buildings, but this test gave us first feedback, and we test the market for see if this indicator interested them. So in short, it reinforced our idea to a larger test, which is why we are here today. And that's all. Okay, it's okay.
I can continue. We decided to begin the test phase of the SRE, but we have still some work to do in order to be prepared for the implementation of the test phase. In this context, we will make information available at the attention of the different stakeholders when we will be ready. This will be on the website related to the construction regulation in France. We will develop in the coming months a web page dedicated to the SRI test phase. Our aim in the test phase is to start with the European technical and legal framework of the Commission's legal acts, as previously presented, based on the 3 key functionalities and the 9 technical domains. The key stakeholders, concerning the key stakeholders, we confirm our willingness to pursue the exchange with the sector and actors which are previously involved in the public tests or which are interested in the experimentation. We are still thinking about how to exchange and at which frequency, so it will be defined later on, but we will give an information as soon as possible on this subject. Maybe Nicolas, you can pursue with the test of building.
Yes. About the test of buildings, our first step is to focus on the methodology and make a larger sample of buildings. After that, we're going to determine if we continue the experimentation and how we will continue this experimentation. The idea is to stay close to the method with a little adaptation to facilitate comparison. First one, we're going to test both method A and method B. We will to define a specific scope for each method to be close to the EPC evaluation and be consistent with the SRE methodology, of course. Quickly, we use the method A for individual house and apartment, and method B for the other non-residential building and more larger, more bigger residential building. So we are very consistent with SRE methodology, no problem. Next adaptation, we're going to define mandatory domain, but why? If I just make a caricature of the current methodology, as I used to say, in theory, we can have a very simple building with a wood stove and a very high SRE over the whole score. So, because it's possible to omit some domain. For example, in France, we're going to make some domain will be mandatory, like ventilation. We have a specific regulation on this domain, so it's impossible for us to omit this ventilation and have an assessment on this domain. So if it's natural ventilation, for this example, we have a 0 on the subscore of this on this domain, and no, it's impossible to omit it. Okay, other point, and very important for us, we want to bring together the SRE and the EPC. So first step on the calculation method. For EPC, we use a very developed calculation method, which is based on calculation algorithm close to dynamic thermal simulation. So we're going to use it for adjust the SRE rating for energy criterion only, of course. This choice is very interesting because we take into account the real context of the building in the energy, at least. Okay, and the second step, it's on the assessors. We're going to use EPC certifier pool for SRE. It's easier for us, of course. Annabelle will develop at this point on the after me. And just I want to say that we would like to let the possibility to a self-assessment by owners or building manager on the building. The main difference with the certified assessment is the official aspect of the result. So we think with the self-assessment, we increase the visibility of the SRE. It's a big point for us, for the SRE, and simplifying access to the assessment. The objective is to encourage owner to go further by calling a specialist to consolidate the result. Okay, last point is not really an adaptation of the methodology, but the goal is to have for this first experiment around 30 buildings to assess, and a time of experimentation around 1 year. Okay. Annabelle, you can continue.
Just a word about for a previous slide, please. Just about the assessment will be carried out. Thank you. Will be carried out by the EPC assessors, as said previously by Nicolas. We have decided to select this professional, we could make the SRE assessment, sorry, within the EPC assessor in France. First, because they are experts of the energy consumption, and that is one of the 3 key functionalities of the SRI. Secondly, on a practical view, this professional will be able to optimize the time spent on the SRI assessment with a potential energy audit or certification that they could carry out. Moreover, we would like to test the potential synergy, as said also by Nicolas, between the French EPC and the current SRI concept. And it seems to be quite relevant to do it with the EPC assessors. Next slide, please. And then about the current status. So we are in preparation of the test phase, as said, because it will begin at the second quarter of 2022. So the different milestones will be, so the preparation of the tools will end at the end of January 2022, will be prepared. The communication materials and recruitment of buildings will begin at the beginning of January on the first quarter of 2022. The assessor training from February of 2022. And as said, the beginning of the national test phase on the second quarter. And at this stage, SRE implementation is not decided yet. Other event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Annabelle and Nicolas, for this detailed presentation. I take also this opportunity to remind the audience that we have the SRI assessment package that is available on request with the common assessment methodology that is described, and the calculation sheet that is included in the assessment package allows member states and users to make some technical domains mandatory, or on the contrary, to discard some technical domains if they are not relevant, or some services if they are not relevant. So the example that was given by Nicolas indeed is can be enabled by the calculation sheet as it is actually. Perhaps, Stein, this is something you may explain further before we go to the break.
Yes, thank you, Sophie. Well, I think you've made a point. Just want to add to that. That's why we need member states in charge of the testing or implementation phase. We, as a support team, receive a lot of requests from research projects, individual companies, etc. But do be reminded that there are some choices to be made in terms of weighting factors for a specific climate, in terms of which services are always to be assessed, not to really play the methodology and come to this caricature that Nicolas discussed. So that's why we need some member states or a national body in charge to make this decision and ensure that there is a common understanding of the methodology across all assessors in a specific national or regional setting.
Thank you for this clarification, and I think it's now time for a break. If I'm correct, we have 15 minutes. So we should meet again at around 10 to 11, if I'm correct. Can you please confirm? Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, so let's have this break and meet again in 15 minutes.
Okay.
So welcome back, everybody. Thank you for participating in this inaugural meeting of the Smart Readiness Indicator platform. I hope you enjoyed the little break, and I hope you enjoyed the sessions earlier. We're now going to, I'll just give you a quick resume of the agenda. Let's see if I can actually advance a slide. There we are. So I'm going to give a quick introduction to the Smart Readiness Indicator platform, to its structure and operation, and how people can apply to join the working groups. And then we will go on to probably the most interesting part, which will be any discussion on the questions and answers. So without any further ado, I will move on the structure and operation of the platform. This is, as I mentioned, the inaugural meeting of the platform. Of the plenary, platform plenary. And the intention of the plenary meetings is to enable stakeholder interaction from any group to participate in. And that will include facilitating discussions on technical, regulatory, and implementation aspects of the SRI. But that platform is going to be supported by working groups. And there are 3 working groups. The first is on member state SRI test phase, which will be exclusively for member states. And then there are 2 open working groups on the maintenance and potential extension of the SRI calculation methodology, and on the SRI value proposition and supporting measures. The operation of the plenary and the working groups will be supported by a platform secretariat that is being provided by the technical assistance support contract until the end of that contract. The function of the secretariat will be supporting the management of the platform, helping to organize the plenary meetings, consolidating outcomes of the platform, and supporting the working groups and individual stakeholder groups that are supporting the platform. The working group on the maintenance and potential extension of the SRI calculation methodology will be looking at the process for updating of service catalogues. So there is an existing service catalogue that's been circulated or is available for, on request. And this is in line with the methodology which is stipulated in the Delegated Act. But there are needs to provide maintenance to this, including to looking at potential extensions when new smart services become available. And there's also issues involved with updating and harmonization of weighting factors for aspects such as climatic zones. So if you're interested in joining, if you want to know more about potential evolutions for data-driven methodologies, which might be a more future-looking version of the SRI, then there is a kind of coordination process happening through the Smart Build for EU Task Force 3, which are in the process of preparing a white paper on this. And so you're very welcome to get involved with that. When we're looking at the scope of the working group on SRI value proposition and supporting measures, which is the last of the working groups, the roles foreseen here are the terms of reference, if you like, are clarification and communication of the SRI's value proposition, supporting the SRI assessment, professional training capacity building, considerations of a common online assessment tool, whatever SRI needs there may be within the functioning of the single market, and then potential linkages between the SRI and other initiatives. The SRI platform management and operational rules basically, I'll give you a quick summary of them here. The plenary is open to all, and thank you very much for joining this inaugural meeting of it, and you're extremely welcome to join all the subsequent ones. The intention is to have 2 meetings per calendar year, and then the working groups, they will be, the membership for the open working groups is going to be limited to help them function better. But efforts will be made to ensure a balanced composition and allow in-depth collaboration. And it's foreseen that those working groups will have at least 4 meetings per year. Obviously, in current times, those meetings will be online, but it will be for each working group to decide those arrangements. There is a sort of provisional target composition for the SRI working groups, which is indicated here against types of actors. The intention is that there should be, aside from the member states and from the commission services and from the secretariat, there would be limits to 15 members for each of the 2 open working groups. And this is an indicative listing of the types of members that are being sought. But if there isn't a cross against a membership organization type, it doesn't mean that that type of organization is not welcome. It just means that the ones where there is a cross are being actively sought. The application for membership is open to all, but the number of members is going to be limited, as I just explained. Participation within the working groups will be limited to the members. The contribution, however, to the working groups is open to everybody. So everybody is invited to submit information, inputs, white papers, etc., to the working groups once they are established. Each working group will be able to decide its own governance, and each working group will report back to the SRI Secretariat on its activities and the outcomes of its work. And then the main outcomes will be presented in the SRI platform plenary meetings. And just to say that the outcomes are obviously advisory from the working groups. So if you are interested in applying for membership of the working groups, then I will give you some quick overview of the process. There are various criteria governing how application should be done. It should be done via an application form. The application for membership per platform working group is open to 1 membership per position per organization. Each member organization is represented by an individual person, and that individual is only allowed to represent 1 organization. The membership and minimum attendance would be that there should be that participants should participate in at least 3/4 of the working group meetings. And then these other details are here. And so just to conclude before we move on to the next session, you are invited to join the platform working groups via submitting applications through the following link. The deadline is the 31st of January next year. There will also be details, they're not currently there, but they will be shortly, on the rules and procedures at the Circa BC link for the SRI platform, which is repeated here. And in a minute, I will post these 2 links in the chat as well, so you can just copy them directly from there. And also these slides will be available as well, so you'll be able to take these links from there. But we very much hope that people will be interested in joining and supporting these platforms. If you can make a meaningful contribution, then please make an application. You're very welcome to be considered, and hopefully these working groups will be extremely productive and have some really interesting results and findings to report back in future meetings of the plenary. So with that, thank you very much. And I will now conclude that part. And I think we're now moving to the discussion and Q&A. I think this session is going to be moderated by Regis Decorn. So Regis, are you there?
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, everyone. I will just post the links that you mentioned, Paul. So again, that is the link to the application form to join the working groups. So feel free to give a look at the information we are requesting here. And now, indeed, let's move to the Q&A session. We have a question in the chat, which is asking, is it possible to say something about the budgets of the testing phase in Austria, Denmark, and France? I will perhaps give the floor to Stein to already give a feedback on behalf of the support team.
Okay, on from support team side or European Commission services side, there's no budget foreseen to support the current test phases in the member states. So I invite you to reach out to the representatives of Austria, Denmark, and France to perhaps discuss this bilaterally. I want to add that there might be a potential interesting funding scheme for other member states. Within the live calls of European Commission, there is funding for projects on increasing the smart readiness of buildings. So that might be a potential interesting thing for you to further look into.
Thank you very much, Stein. We also had a question earlier on the chat, which was about getting contact details from official representatives for Germany. So that's what we answered, that indeed Germany is not officially yet involved in a testing phase, but you can contact us at our email. So I guess you got it on the chat. We wrote several times. The email is support@smartreadinessindicator.eu. And then we can try to contact the national representative to see if he is able to get back to you. And so the same applies for you. If you have a similar question, do not hesitate to contact us to see if we can support in establishing the link. I see we have another question now in the chat. So the question is, what are the requirements for SRI experts? Stein, do you want perhaps to address this one as well?
I think Mr. Paul Waite is better suited to answer this one.
Yeah. I think the requirements depend on where things are up to. Is my understanding. If you look at the Delegated Act, once the SRI is actually, once member states are moving to the implementation phase and they're actually implementing certificates, then the certificate assessors need to be qualified. Now, the precise definition of what that is, and I must admit I don't remember myself exactly what the wording is in that, but we have to look back in the Delegated Act. Well, probably I'm assuming they're up to member states to decide what level of qualification or what the process would be. But that is after the test phase. So how member states wish to implement test phases of the course is entirely up to them. And then and that is all tied to the issuance of formal SRI certificates. If people wish to do self-assessments, of course, anybody is able to do that. And so it's up to them to determine whatever level of qualification they would want for anybody assessing their facilities.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'd like to remind as well on we conducted the first SRI training, which gives some indication on the level of complexity of SRI assessment. So there you already have some, I guess, useful information if you look at the slides of this event. And in addition, if you go to the SRI website, we also have a more comprehensive SRI training slide deck, which gives actually a more in-depth presentation of the SRI calculation methodology. So that's also a useful resource you might be interested to have a look at. Do we have other questions from the audience? Feel free to ask them in the Q&A. I see we have a new one. And it looks like a technical question. So what is the difference between using the method B and specifying the services applicable to a building and using the method custom service mix?
I'll take this one, Regis. So in the prior technical support studies, there was one methodology being developed, but there was the introduction of two separate service catalogues. A service catalog B which was more detailed and potentially better suited for more complex buildings, say large offices, hospitals, big schools, etc. And a more simplified list of services called method A, which was better suited probably for small-scale residential buildings, for self-assessment, because also the language was, we tried to ease the language a bit, so it's better comprehensible for non-experts. Now, in the delegated act, the service catalogues are not described in detail. So there's some flexibility to further look into that. Furthermore, there will be the need to further update the SRI from time to time as new services hit the market, for example. So that's why inherently we need some flexibility in this method. And so in the calculation sheet to assist in the testing phase, we've built in this flexibility to test other services mixes than the ones presented in the technical support study. So besides the services of catalog A and catalog B, you also have the possibility to make your own service mix. It could just be adding 1 or 2 services to the catalogs presented in the technical support study, removing some of them, making a list specifically dedicated for a specific building type, for example. That was also one of the discussions held earlier. Do we need another service list for buildings as, say, a swimming pool? Because this is quite specific in its usage. Perhaps we need specific services for such a specific building. And so to accommodate doing this kind of tests, this calculation sheet now includes the possibility to have your custom service list defined by yourself or at member state level if it's part of an official national testing phase.
Thank you very much, Stein. I perhaps take the opportunity also to remind that you can get the SRA assessment package so that you can test it yourself, and for that it's again the same email that you have to use to contact us, and we will simply ask you to read the terms and conditions to tell us that you agree with them, and then we will send you back the assessment package. So it's the calculation sheet, and there is as well a practical guide which is explaining how to use it basically. So feel free to contact us again. And thank you very much, Stein, for taking this question. I'll see another one coming in. Will there be more information or more definitions regarding the different functionality levels? And if so, when? Stein again.
Okay, but other colleagues can also jump in. The service levels are inherently part of this service catalogs. So a service level, I skipped those technical details in the introduction, but basically comes down to, for a particular service, say temperature control in a building, which is relevant for the domain of heating. There are various levels of smartness, and a non-smart default is a fully manual control. A really advanced, very smart one, which we call a high functionality level, could, for example, be control in each individual room of a building. So no central thermostat, but in each individual room, and affected by presence detection and potentially signals from an external grid, etc. So whether a service has 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 functionality levels really depends on the service on its own. So it's not that service level 2 is per se the best. For some services, it goes up to 3 or 4 in the methodology. It's just the way that the assessor fills it out. He or she checks the functionality levels, and underneath that there is this matrix with impact scores that then is weighted into the total overall SRI score. So that's a bit of a technical detail, but so this functionality levels and corresponding scores, again, there has been a proposal in the technical support studies with services, the service catalog, with the scores, with the functionality levels. But in the current status of the national testing phase, there's the possibility for member states to adjust this, to test different settings, additional functionality levels, etc. And part of the work of the technical support team and the working groups is to investigate whether there's a need for some harmonization of that, whether there is a need for additional EU guidance to make sure that, for example, for some of the services, it's really a harmonized EU approach, whereas for others, potentially there remains the flexibility to adapt this to a local context. Hope this answers this question.
Thank you, Stein. And I have put again in the chat the link and the email to contact us to get this SRI assessment package, because it's a way for you to see practical examples of what Stein just explained, the different functionality levels of the default service catalog, which is in the SRI calculation sheet. And so thank you for the question. We do have another question. In the meantime, what do you view as the key missing technology which must be developed to expedite building digitalization to improve SRI scores? Stein or perhaps Paul, if you want to intervene as well.
Well, it's a very interesting question. I'm sure Paul and perhaps others also want to jump in, but I think there's several levels to that. I'm not sure where the question is, what technologies do you need in a particular building? Because in that case, the answer is it's not one single technology, and the SRI tries to keep this broad view of having both looking at energy savings, at flexibility, at convenience for the occupant, well-being, etc. All these impact categories, and it's not up to us to say which one is more important. And I think it will be important to make sure that in a true smart building you cover all of these impacts as much as possible. If the question is more on what kind of new technologies are we missing on the market, what are we expecting to come up in the near future, that's a very interesting topic to be further discussed in the working groups, and also to check how we can set up a process to make sure that the SRI methods are updated in a way that they keep track of technology innovations. We cannot at this moment define this is a smart building for once and forever. No, there will be this evolution, and it will be very interesting to discuss with stakeholders from private sector, member states, etc., on how to devise a process to make sure that we keep track with these evolutions on the market.
Thank you, Stein. I might add also on the earlier question on the functionality levels and practical examples that the SRI support team, we are working on developing some very easy case studies to illustrate with practical examples how it works. So this is something we are working on at the moment, and we will make available shortly. And another aspect on indeed what you mentioned, Stein, what are the possible innovative technologies? I invite as well all the audience to have a look also at this Smart Build for EU project, which we mentioned earlier, and we put the link in the chat as well, because they developed some interesting brochures to highlight some innovative smart buildings technology. So that can be also interesting examples to look at. Thank you very much again for being so active in the Q&A. I see we have another question, which is, as a lot of the SRI indicators are requiring a two-way exchange of information, is it foreseen to further develop the SRI by scaling it up from buildings to districts?
Shall I jump in on this? It's a very good question. I think the scope of the SRI is actually defined in the EPPD, and it is the boundary is the building, which is in part why it is smart readiness. It's not actually a full indicator of smartness being delivered. It's the readiness to deliver smartness, and this is particularly the case when you are dealing with interactions with the grid, grid flexibility issues, which I suspect is behind the query about scaling it from buildings to districts. But it does raise the question of what scale might actually be operational. How would you integrate SRI assessments and values within microgrids, etc., and regional networks? And I think that's certainly an issue that's worth exploring. But I'm not aware currently that there's any plan to change the scope. But this is the sort of thing that as a scheme evolves, it may become clear that it has a value also at a broader scope, and there could be some way of actually applying it at a broader scope. And that might be something that's very worthwhile investigating in follow-up activities, particularly through research type programs like LIFE, etc. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that topic, but
thank you very much, Paul. We have other questions and comments actually on the topic of interoperability and open protocols. So basically the comment is how the current methodology is addressing these topics.
It's a good question, but a very tough one. It's been investigated in the prior technical support studies because it was out there on the table as well. The request to look into whether or not the SRI could include that in the calculation methodology or additional information. And at that time, we actually set up a dedicated group of experts working on that. So part of the topical working groups established at that moment really looked into that. We set up a dedicated survey, etc. And eventually the conclusion was that it's a very important and necessary topic, but at that moment there was not a sufficiently developed method to really encompass it directly into the SRI assessment process. Some of the thinking behind that is further elaborated in the technical reports. So if you want to know more, you can delve into that. I'll just give you a few examples of the complexity, and one of it is already commented here in the comment section, that it's not because you use an open protocol that it's per se interoperable. So that's one of the issues. Then there's also a lot of different open protocols which do not necessarily can communicate with each other. So that brings you into the complicated domain of which protocols are mutually interoperable or can, through further semantic interoperability, exchange data and information. Which is a domain which is in constant development and not sufficiently elaborated at the moment that the SRI method was established. Next barrier to further assess this was the level of expertise that you would require from an assessor, and the possibility to actually assess this on site and have the information on protocols, etc., readily available. So based on that, the conclusion was, let's not embed it directly in the SRI methodology, but open the possibility to have additional information on interoperability, on data security, etc., as additional information adjacent to the SRI assessment. And that also ties into the discussions on whether the SRI is just something on paper or whether that's really also an online tool that is much easier to be updated, etc. So in conclusion, there is not a definitive answer at this moment on how to do that, but that's again something of the elements we really want to discuss with all the experts out there as part of the working groups, to see if we can find a feasible method to include that, because definitely it would be of a lot of additional value to many of the stakeholders here, and further increase the market relevance of the SRI. So if any of you has ideas on that, we very much welcome you to speak up, be part of these working groups, or provide input to the working groups by sending white papers or additional documentation for us to look into.
Thank you very much, Stein. And once again, Paul mentioned we have this application form online to join the working groups. We have put the link in the chat as well, so you can already have a look at the information we are requesting to join those sessions. Another question that I see, actually many questions which are popping up at the moment. So the next one is, which sort of harmonization of the SRI methodology is envisaged across member states? Or would the SRI contribute to the fragmentation of the building construction market, taking away possible benefits of scale?
Paul, I think this relates to EU guidance, so would you be willing to take the floor?
Yes, sorry, there's a bit of background noise going on here, so I just muted myself, but hopefully that won't get in the way. Yeah, it's a very good question about the degree to which there is harmonization and the degree to which there is local aspects in terms of the implementation. And the current structure is trying to strike a balance in that. Obviously, when it comes to the provision of smart equipment, it's very helpful to have a common European language on this in particular. Anything which is traded in a single market capacity, it's very beneficial if there is a common language, common structure, common agreement on functionality levels, etc., so that can be communicated through the service offer in a consistent way, and that way will build aggregate scale and will increase the impact of the Smart Readiness Indicator and increase the adoption of it. On the other hand, there are specificities at the member state level or local level, which sometimes need to be taken into account. And they can affect the issues such as how the grid is operated, for example, and regulated, and how that might engage on the flexibility side. And there's obviously the climatic issue, which is looked at in the weighting factors and so forth. So I think it would be very helpful to have as harmonized implementation as possible, but it does need to reflect the realities on the ground and find the right balance. And so hopefully this is, and certainly it will be an issue which will be explored consistently throughout the platform, I imagine, and trying to find the right trade-offs between those aspects.
Thank you very much, Paul. While you have the mic open, I think there is another one for you in the chat, since it relates to the survey on the design options for the certificate. So that's a link that Paul has posted earlier. It's indeed an open survey for everyone to comment on possible design options with a deadline of 15th of January. So the question is, what will happen next? So basically, what are the next steps after this EU survey?
Okay, so the survey, the first thing to understand is that when member states move into formal implementation, when they're ready to do so, they will issue their own certificates. And they are formally responsible for the design of those certificates. But in the previous two studies, technical support studies, there was work done to investigate possible design concepts for the SRI. And in particular, there were focus groups done with consumers. There was also feedback from a number of assessors as well. This time around, to help give some input to member states to help them formulate their own thinking about how they might wish to design SRI certificates, this survey has been structured to analyze some of the issues. Now, it's particularly looking at the issues which are formulated through the Delegated Act, because the Delegated Act talks about what must be in the certificate, what is completely optional to put in the certificate, and what is conditional on something else being ready. And we already spoke about earlier about information on cybersecurity and interoperability. If there's additional information that's something which could be presented on the certificate, but it's not a requirement. Whereas there are certain requirements from the delegated act about what needs to be in a certificate. So it's exploring some of these, particularly it's looking at the voluntary options, the value added of those, and the conditional ones. And it's giving one or two examples, but they're only illustrations. They're not, in no sense should they be viewed as being, this is the formal SRI certificate design. They're just illustrations of concepts in this survey. And we're hoping to get feedback from market actors, especially those who are close to the building users. So the EPC assessors, the facility managers, the estate agents, that kind of community who understand how people would actually relate to this material. And then we can feed that back to the member states and they can make use of it as they wish. That's the process that's being envisaged.
Thank you very much. Paul, perhaps that's the opportunity for you to post again the link to this ongoing survey, which was posted, I think, a bit earlier.
It is in the chat, fairly near the top. So yeah, scroll up, you will find it there.
Normally, you should indeed find it.
Just a follow-up question. Will there be a template for issuing certificates that can be used in the national test phases?
I'm not aware that there would be a template. There are, of course, the instructions from the delegated act about what's the formal, once the certificates are formally implemented, should include. In the test phases, it is very much up to each member state to do what they wish, obviously. But I think if member states are interested in this, then we'll be very happy, and the technical assistance team to have a dialogue about it. So if there is some interest in having such a template, I'm sure we can examine that question and see what can be done to support it.
Thank you very much. We have another question, which is one of the main objectives of the SRI is to ensure that the building reacts to information received from the energy grid. Reality shows that there is very little information, namely energy costs, being transferred from the grid to the building's BMS. What is being done to improve this open communication? I'll give the floor to Stein for this one.
Yes, again, a very interesting question. And the SRI has a quite peculiar take on this, or what's the purpose of the SRI is to make sure that we can assess how your building is able to react when such signals are available. For example, quite similar situation with market availability of flexibility services. At present, this is not everywhere available. So many of the buildings could, although they have the technology, not yet participate in flexibility trading, but we do not want to punish, so to say, the SRI score of a building. We really look at the readiness on how your technical systems and everything that makes this operate are ready to offer such services as soon as they hit the market. And so in a sense, the SRI can also be a driver for market actors to make available such services. So that's the role of the SRI. Besides that, there is European legislation, for example, on opening up energy markets, allowing local energy communities, etc. So that's one other route that this is being dealt with. And then yet another one are various research projects, standardization projects, etc., all working towards this goal of making sure to standardize communication and make sure that will hit the market soon. So the SRI is just taking this little aspect of it, of looking at the building site and how it can in the future make this communication if it's not possible at this moment.
Thank you, Stein. Thank you as well, Sophie, who has put again the link to this online SRI certificate survey so that you don't have to scroll up too much. The link is there again. I think we have time to take one last question, which I see there, and thank you for that. So the question is, how can the SRI support and drive building renovation?
Shall I take the floor again? But other colleagues, please jump in. Again, a discussion which was held elaborately in the development of the SRI. So before now venturing into the testing and implementation phase, the SRI itself is not to replace, for example, an energy performance certificate. It's really looking at the added value of building controls, smart technologies, etc. But of course, that does not stand on its own, and it does not make sense to make a perfectly smart building, which is very poor in terms of insulation, etc. So the two should go hand in hand, but the SRI just focuses on this specific topic of smartness. And in the testing and implementation phase, one of the potential venues is actually for member states to make the two assessments, energy performance certification and SRI assessment, go hand in hand. It would make sense to check if that's feasible in terms of expertise of the assessors, in terms of time and efforts put on sites. So voilà, the different focus, but I think they can both strengthen each other.
Thank you very much, Stein. Perhaps a very last one. I see we have two different questions, which seems related on the standardization aspects. The first one being, is there a list available of the standardization initiatives? And the next one is there any common EU project for a standard communication or protocol data set or utility matters on user side?
I think we have to refer to our friends and colleagues of the Smart Build for EU project. That's a coordination and support action funded by European Commission, which brings together the various research projects on smart buildings. So different focus really on research projects, and they produce one of the outcomes of this project is the creation of white papers on topics such as, for example, a recently published one on standardization and certification. So in those white papers, we have 10, 12, 15 different EU projects working together, sharing their insights. And so we welcome you to look into those outputs, and kind reminder that one of the other focus groups of this project is looking into next generation of smart building assessments, so fully data driven. That's not something we cover here with a support contract, but if you're interested in that topic, we welcome you to reach out to that project and join into that effort as well.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Stein. We have put the link many times to Smart Build for EU, but I put it again just because you mentioned it. Thanks a lot. I guess we want to finish on time this session. Thanks again for being so active and so many to participate. We were over 200. I'll give the floor now to Brigitte Jacquemont to close this first SRI meeting.
Thank you very much, Regis. So maybe to start, I will really like to thank you, the support team, for your work you have done since May, and for organizing this event. Also, really a big thank to front-runner countries, Austria, Denmark, France, for really sharing their national plan with us today. It was quite interesting and inspiring. On the Commission side and on the support team side, we are very happy to start this journey with you and to set up this SRI platform. So regarding the next step, so we will of course continue our support to member states in the test phase. We are really looking forward to have more in-depth discussion with you within the working groups, and I really invite you to join these 3 working groups. And in parallel, of course, we pursue our conversation with member states. We have several member states who have shown a big interest for the SRI. So we continue the discussion with them, and in this context, all the stakeholders, you have a role to play also to engaging discussion also at national level with them. So thank you again for the discussion, for the input today. And we really look forward to seeing you in about 6 months for the next platform meeting. And I wish you all a happy Christmas break. Thank you.
So thanks again also from the support team. We'll stop here and look forward to see you next time. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.